How does the training you're doing with UP compare to the training you've done in the past?
Much more intense. One obvious difference is that I've been doing stuff alone. Never had a training partner or a buddy that I would go to the gym with. I would just always go to the gym whenever my schedule allowed me to go to the gym, which I was pretty disciplined about going. I would always show up to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, but it wouldn't be at a consistent time. It would be in the morning early sometimes, in the late afternoon. So being here at a consistent time with a trainer that spots you and that encourages you, that was a huge difference because it allowed me to push myself into some really uncomfortable areas that I would not have felt comfortable pushing myself into before. Number one. Number two, the drop in weights that I was lifting. That was totally revelatory to me because I prided myself on being a person that went to the gym. During COVID, I was jogging every day. I felt like I was physically active. And then I learned here that the technique that I was using for just traditional exercises, bench presses, incline presses, they were not, I was wasting my time. I was using too much shoulders. I wasn't using enough back. I wasn't using enough core. And that's one thing that I really noticed in the mirror is the shape of the gains that I've made are vastly different to the shape of the gains that I used to make on my own just by brute forcing lifting the weight. I would get bigger but just larger overall. Whereas now I can tell when you're telling me to keep a certain form, it's because there's a certain shape that's being developed, on the shoulders or on the arms. So that was really different. And then the nutrition. I think that was huge, huge, huge. I mean, I've developed a totally new appreciation for eating raw vegetables. I eat it all the time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Meal prepping. I spend a lot of time in the kitchen now. And that's not something that I used to do before, but it makes sense because I think that's been a huge contributor to any progress that I've made is the changes in eating and in meal prepping and in the amount of food that I eat. Like I never feel full anymore with the meals that I eat, whereas I come from a Spanish family, that's what you do. You eat until you're full and then you got to undo your belt buckle and now you've stopped eating. Now you can stop eating once you have to undo your belt buckle. Not anymore. Now I can just eat like a 500 calorie meal and that's plenty.
What are the most powerful lessons you've learned about training and nutrition?
So for training, I'll say technique above all else. The simple act of doing a curl isn't just getting the weight up. It's keeping your shoulders back. Like so many things that you've said is keeping the shoulders back, your elbows in, angling your pinkies up sometimes. These small adjustments that make it harder to lift the same weight are what I need to go to. That's the motions that I ought to be targeting as opposed to gripping it a certain way or positioning my shoulders a certain way so that I can lift the weight. That's a huge lesson, right? If it feels harder, it's probably the right motion. I can just drop the weight until I get that motion correct. As far as nutrition, it's something I knew already. Carbohydrates are bad for me, for my particular body type, but the increase in vegetables and the 0-calorie seasonings and 0-calorie oils, the avocado oil, the Pam spray, that's huge, right? I don't think I've had juice in like 3 months. It's always been the sweeteners, the whole earth sweeteners. All that stuff is huge for me because I think it's taken out a huge chunk of just empty calories that I didn't, even knowing that carbohydrates were bad, I thought they were like, ice cream or cake, and I never did too much of that. But just all the other just ambient sugars that were around on all the other foods, I think that was huge. And then finally, meal prepping, because this is a lifestyle change, the way I see it. And like any type of transformation. I do a lot of business transformation in my day job. This is a lifestyle transformation. You have to rethink your routine. You have to implement new processes. And meal prepping is something I never did. You would cook as much as you could, and then you'd eat it until it was gone, and then you cook again. Now, if I don't want to spend 30 minutes every time I need to eat preparing a meal so that I can eat it in another 30 minutes, I have to front load that, like on Sunday night and prep like 3-4 days worth of salads and chicken and all the other stuff that I'm going to eat. And it's liberating because it takes that variable out of the equation. I don't have to wonder, okay, what is it that I'm going to eat? I know what I'm going to eat. It's right there, and I just eat it.
How has your transformation, how has this affected the hypoglycemia that you've had to deal with?
That's a great question. So the way it's affected my hypoglycemia is prior to this, if I take a step back, I would always feel and recognize in my own head that I would stop doing any kind of physical activity when I would feel a tingling sensation in my fingers or around my face. I would usually feel it over here. Those were early warning signs that I was about to crash, a sugar crash. And I tried to manage it always, by eating more protein and less of the carbohydrates. But I would have mixed success, and it's a terrible feeling. You get very lightheaded, you go pale, you get nauseous. And then when that passes, you have like 15 minutes of a terrible headache, and then you recover. Nobody wants to go through that. And so when you're working out, if you feel those early warning signs, it's always in the back of your head. I don't want to crash. I don't want to crash. And you'll stop pushing yourself way before your muscles are exhausted because you're anticipating a crash. So I was kind of robbing myself of some gains, robbing myself of some effort. Since I started working out here, I've come to the edge a few times, but never gone into crash territory. And most recently now, I can actually feel those same kind of tingling sensations at times, especially in my face, over here, my cheeks. But I don't crash. I don't seem to crash anymore. And I think it's because my body composition has changed. Maybe there's less junk there, I wasn't a junk food eater, but whatever junk I did eat, there's just a whole lot less of it there. And so I feel a whole lot more confident, even working out by myself, that I can get into that territory and exhaust the muscles before I exhaust my tolerance for crashing.
When you saw the results photos at UP, did you think it was possible? And what would you say to those who don't believe the results are possible?
So when I saw the photos, it's actually kind of funny. When I was a kid in Peru, American movies would come over, right? And that's what you saw, is the American movies, right? And it was awesome, but Rambo came out back then, Rambo 2, Rambo 3. And I would just remember looking at Sylvester Stallone and saying, how? How does that happen? And, very cynically natured, they take steroids, they cheat, there's something there, they get an operation. That's the answer. And so when I first saw the photos, I think the second time around that we did measurements, and I could see a noticeable difference, I started seeing definition here on my sides. And that's made me think of, not that I look like Sylvester Stallone, but I always thought to myself, the fact that you could see some kind of muscle definition, not on the six pack, but on the sides, to me, that used to be something otherworldly. It was something that other genetically gifted people could achieve. And then I saw that, I'm like, I have that thing too. It's almost like we're the same species. It was revelatory. So it became pretty fun to start seeing the advances from that point forward. And now there's like these little divots over here on the side, right? I don't even know what they're called, but they're there. And I'm like, those are the things that I used to see, on the TV screen. And that's, in a very childlike fashion, that's what I was shooting for. I wanted to go for an aesthetic, a movie star superhero type of physique, because that's the goal. All the Marvel super, I even mentioned that to you, right? I wanted to go through a training program like what the Marvel superhero actors do, because it's their job when they get hired by the production. So it was a bit of childlike wonder and a bit of satisfaction, saying I'm achieving the thing I set out to achieve. So totally happy and satisfied and fulfilled.